How are you guys doing today? You guys having a good? Well, yeah. Well, it's early enough. I'm still in that place where I'm not sure what I think yet. It's early. It's going. It's going. Um, I am very glad to be here. We had a good day the other day. What we're going to do this morning is take a look at the Skew chisel, and it seems to be the demon and demise of most people's workshops. But we're going to talk about how it's actually a very good, helpful tool, and there's a lot of good things about it. It's actually a shear slicer. It is not something that you go outside and throw at a tree and see if you can, hit a bullseye. It's actually a really good tool that works very well for a lot of things. We'll take a look at a few things here. We can pass around. It's always good to have some commotion while there's commotion in the front. We've got to create some nice kinetic energy. We're going to do that. So we've got a little spinning top. We're going to do spinning top with a loose ring on it, and we're going to make that out of probably a piece of exotic wood I have back here, a piece of bubinga. We can pass the top around. What I'd like to see is who can spin it the longest. You guys can kind of play around with that idea. It's always kind of fun to do that. This is a little ring box that was created. All the exterior was cut with a half-inch skew. A little piece of ebony right here. You can probably be careful with that because there was a ring in that my fiance said, "Yes, I will marry you." So, she said, you might ask, well, why did I bring it? And he's like, well, she said I could, but it's still my fault if I break it. So just try to be careful, I guess. I don't know. So I'm a production turner by trade, so if I did try to make that, I could duplicate it, but she'd still probably know. So just the way of the world, right? So we're going to take a look at a particular type of sweep on a skew chisel and why it's favorable. This would be, if we can take a look maybe under here. This might be, there we go. So right here, this would be considered a skew that has a soft radius on it. It doesn't have an area where you've seen some of the radius skews that have a little 90-degree flat edge right here. This is one where the sweep begins at the long point of the skew. The skew's point of symmetry with the bar stock, that is to say right here, long point, and is a soft sweep. I find that you can peel a little faster with it, and one's ability to be able to shear slice and shear cut, which are two different things, is a little bit better with this kind of grind altogether. So that then should lead us into maybe why there are, in contrast, grinds that aren't as favorable. We can take a look at over the board real quick and maybe draw a reference to this. Again, the first portion of this demo was going to be talking about end grain and really cutting with and cross end grain. So that's that. So that's what the grind that. Oh, maybe I should pass this around. Here you go. You want to get that in circulation as well. That's what we're looking at. Be careful that just sharpened at. It is sharp. It is not like factory sharp. It's like sharp. So be careful, guys. So what we have is the soft radius skew. Reason I wouldn't go for something like this, which oftentimes you see ground, this sort of angled, this sort of 45-degree angle, but yet sharp skew right there. I don't prefer that grind, being that you can't. It's not quite as good of a peeler. When we go through the cuts the first time, we're going to do first time around here, we're going to just take a square between centers. This is center work blank. Looks like what I have here is maybe some ash. It looks like maybe ash right there. That's perfect. And we'll talk about why that particular grind isn't in our best interest. Something like this is also kind of a monstrosity of bad. It's not something so good. You have this sort of round. There's a radius right there, but there's some real issues with that grind. We'll talk about why, in contrast to the skew that you're seeing being passed around is going to be a little bit better for us. You guys have probably, everyone in here may have at one time or another purchased an oval skew. Usually I say accidentally, and the reason I say accidentally is you probably bought it with a, yeah. Phil Brown is the king of the king of the wrong skew. No, he's gonna change his ways soon though. He's going to change. You're on your way, Phil. But the trouble with that skew is that it has convex bar stock, so you can't quite make a peeling cut with it. It's rocking around on the if it's being used as a scraper flat on the tool rest. It doesn't make very consistent peeling cuts, among some other things. So this is a demo. I want to keep going, not talk too much, but get going into this. And we should maybe pass this around as well. This is a little spindle. This is all turned with the skew the other day. This is kind of like just a little sample of something that would be shear cut straight off the tool. So that's pretty clean, all with the skew. All the loose rings as well. So what we're going to do is take a square between centers, rough this down actually with the skew, and we want to go ahead and make some, probably roll some beads with this, talk about why we want to roll spherical shaped bead, larger sphere shaped bead, as per a good model of practice. That'll then transition again into making a spinning top with a loose ring, and it's going to be a good time. I think you guys are going to really enjoy it. So let's go ahead and actually get started. You guys don't have to be polite. I know it's quiet as a library because you guys are all listening and like, what's going on? What's going on? You guys want to just shout things out? That's okay. I'm not so polite that I would be offended if you just screamed things out. I'm fine with hecklers. I enjoy it. It's fun. There's nothing more boring than a demonstration where everyone thinks they have to follow all the rules. You guys can say what you want. It's fun. We're just having fun, okay? Oh, good. Yeah, well, everyone's just waking up, though. Anyways. So we'll go ahead and I'll find centers by eye best that I can. We'll see where that addresses. That's pretty close. And let's get it so that it's good enough. There we go. When I'm between centers like this, I want to make sure that I do not have any play on the headstock side. That is to say that I should, if I lock the lathe, have some play in the spindle right there. However, the place that I want to check it is actually right here, so that when I'm, so just to ensure that the prongs are dug in properly, and that's something for any of these young guys who are learning to turn. Just little fundamental things like that are very good to understand and know and to follow. Okay, the trouble at my level is safety, because we do things fast enough that we have to really ensure to be very careful, and we oftentimes can lose that vision. So we need to make sure we're good here. And the amount of play I see here beyond the play from the bearings looks good. If I'm tearing right now into the end grain, you better believe that if I'm running at 1500 RPM, 18, 20, or 2000, it's going to be very dangerous. It's no good. So that's going to be a good spot. Now we'll go ahead and take a look at roughing this piece down between centers. And the first thing to do that's kind of a good thing to see is if you can do something incorrect, but safe for the sake of being able to show why, that's going to be a good thing. So I'm actually going to start with an incorrect cut at the very center of this piece, okay? And then to talk a little bit about myself before I actually turn the lathe on, just a little bit. So I'm actually a professional wood turner by trade. I performed a furniture apprenticeship in the Northeast for maybe about 3 years. But spent about 10,000 hours on the lathe, and overall have made well over 2,000 different bowls, different types of bowls of different design. Have done a lot of spindle and balustrade turning. That was out in the Northeast. You could see me at any of the major schools. Aeromont is one place I teach at. Sammy's out there too. Is one of the best in there. Well, Sammy's great. Some good guys in here. But anyways, teach at Craft Supplies Utah. Teach at a number of different places. And it's really kind of a special thing for me to get out to clubs, to meet everyone, and to take a look at just what's going on in other portions of the country. So without further ado, I'm happy to get started for you guys. Now, in terms of the height of the tool rest, well, that's too low. We need to go ahead and raise this up so that when the tool is hitting when the tool's sitting 90 degrees flat on the tool rest, that I'm near the top of the tailstock quill right here in the live center area. That should be pretty good. But let's start with an incorrect cut. Talk about grain orientation a little bit. Okay. And this is spinning pretty fast. I'm going to be spinning probably near. Let's go maybe near about 1900 RPM, 2000. There we go. So if I make a cut in here like this, just for you guys who have not done this before, or any of that you need to learn a little bit, that's not what I want to do first. Anyone know why? I mean, it's pretty apparent to see. But we can talk about grain orientation now because we see a little bit of tear out, okay? The tear out's an indication of a few things. One is that the first cut that I made directly to the very center of the blank was correct. That's a shear cut. That's to say that if I start from the larger diameter going downhill, that's a correct cut. Trouble is that on square stock, if I go to what is considered right, then I have all this material that I've just torn out. So if I'm to make a correct cut, you say, well, that looks like it's good. What happened here? Well, if you go uphill on end grain, you're going to tear the fibers out. Therefore, it would be better to always start on one of the corners and make passes inward so that every pass that I make, every cut that I make, ends in space, or that is to say without hitting end grain. So it's good to see grain orientation, and first off in this way, I find, so that you know that when you make that cut, you know that you're going to get that tear out if you go to the right or to the left at the very center of a blank. The rule changes when you turn a hunk of wood, that's just a hunk of wood, into round stock, which is an actual blank. And you say, well, I thought this was a blank. It's not, as I see it. A blank is something that when you actually have all the sides necessary or that need to be trued up, that is to say the exterior diameter, and pairing off the end grains right here to true up, then you have a blank, because that means you have the minimal or least amount of vibration throughout the entire piece, so as to then be able to lead with the bevel first, not with the cutting edge, the raw weight of the cutting edge to rough out, to then actually be able to make efficient cuts. So we're right now in a stage of just roughing something out, getting it into round, so that we can actually have a blank. So we're not quite there yet, but it's good to see that we start at center for that reason, just so you know, okay? If you guys have questions, you don't have to, just shout them out. That's fine. We'll be good, and we'll keep going. So I'm going to actually rough this down with the Skew chisel. Not preferred tool to do, but I prefer using it. So there, I'm going to use it. I don't care what you think. I'm going to do it anyway. So what I'm going to do is I'm not going to take the tool in flat like this. That's not a correct cut either. It's not what I want to do. What I rather want to do is create what's a planing cut where the tool's at 45 degrees, and I'm leading with a supported edge. The supported edge is going to be right here. Supported means that simply that if I'm rotating the tool, and you can see that I have support from the actual bar stock right here resting on the tool rest. So that's a supported edge right here. Thank you for the video work, appreciate it. And that's my unsupported edge. So what I can do is just take it through here like that. Just like this. And you can see that when I make that cut, what I'm doing is that I'm making scooping cuts into what would be considered space, not more end grain. If I start over here, that's where I just create all that tear out. So just we have to know that whether we're using a spindle roughing gouge that is, or a roughing or a skew, wouldn't prefer skew first time out. This is just kind of to show you that you can do things with the skew that are a little different. You want to make sure that you start from one side or the other, move your way in with scooping passes. I can go to the left as well. Doesn't matter what side I go to. In this case, I'm going to use the long point of the skew right here. Long point, short point. You can go either way. So that's leading with the long point. One of the things I like about this particular radius on the skew is that it basically allows me to expose a little bit more supported edge. I don't know if Phil would agree, but I don't know how all you guys would agree, but it's something that's worth trying. One of the troubles with a skew ground like this, that is to say, just kind of just a square ground tool, that albeit it has its merit. Trouble with that is that unsupported edge, if it doesn't just stay up the entire time, the tendency, and that would be. This would be the supported edge, but that's my unsupported edge. You can see the play that I would have in there. If that drops, that's where I get my catch. Okay, so if I don't, so I find that if I have the round stock tool, the round radius, it's a little bit more forgiving. Nonetheless, you might say in response to that, well, I've never used a skew or found one to ever forgive me for any of my sins. So you remember? I don't know. You might say that. I don't know. So just an idea there. So we almost have a blank. And we'll talk about the cutting action here in a little bit. The way that I'm roughing something out right now is more commentary, not on rubbing the bevel first, which is to say right here, if we rub the bevel, when we make a true cut or a slice in wood turning, that is to say we're not doing this. That's just a scrape. So the first cuts that we're making are kind of a scrape, even though we're entering at a plane where we're actually shear slicing the fibers like this. That would be at 45 degrees in this fashion. When we're dealing with the square, we have to use the raw weight of the tool and think of the tool as an extension of the body, more so than we're just kind of sitting over here hoping it all works out. Okay, we can't do that. We have to step up to the plate and we gotta swing. Okay, that's kind of how it works. So what we're going to do now is we're going to start to take a bevel rubbing cut to begin chewing this piece up. We stop the lathe. You can say, well, you still have square sections. That's not quite a blank yet, or that's not quite. It's still a hunk of wood. It's almost a blank. We're getting close to that. We can still start rubbing the bevel as long as we have predominantly 360 degrees of material. So that's looking good. You can also see here the direction of the grain. The tendency with most turners is that if you get used to spindle turning, you kind of play around with those ideas and think they're interesting enough that you'll then just jump into bowl turning. And that's what everyone does typically because it's fun to turn bowls. It's a great thing to turn bowls. So when you learn what you learn in bowl turning is absolutely the opposite in spindle turning. This would be something that would be considered spindle turn project. That is to say, with the fibers facing the direction of the bed right there, here, you can also see, you can get a good idea, the fibers facing this way. So what we can't do is we cannot start down here and make cuts uphill. We always have to start from the top of the blank, making downhill cuts this way. The exception, not an exception to the rule, but when we start again, we're basically just taking the raw weight of the tool, the cutting edge, and we're leading with the edge. Now we have to do something a little different, where we lead with the bevel. That is to say that we're not again scraping. I'm not treating this like it's round stock anymore. Doing this, doing that. That was how my cut started. Okay, that's a roughing cut. Now on something like this, that's okay, but it's not near ideal. Now I say, well, you're still making pretty good progress making those cuts. That might be true, but there's a better way to create a surface that's burnished. I want to have a surface where basically what I do is I'm creating a little bit of a burnish mark right here, raise the handle, and I lead with either the short or the long point of the tool. I'm going to the right, my right, probably your left, we'll see, it depends on how you look at it. But I am actually creating a burnish mark and allowing myself to create a nice beautiful pass so that I can shrew this piece up. It's almost there, but not quite. So we're going to do a few things. We're not just going to beautify this piece and make it beautiful. I'm going to show you how to make this thing catch too, okay? You might say, well, I've used a skew. I don't need to see that. I already know how to do it. I'm an expert in catching. It's like, well, I'm going to show you how to be an even better expert at it so that you know how to do it, and then in order to know what you need to do to not do it, okay? That's the point. So this is not a catch-a-thon. This is here to show you guys a few things about that. So, and then also talk about the skew in terms of what side to use, what side to cut, what direction I cut with it if I'm planing. It doesn't matter which side you use. So it comes down to the practicality of my body mechanics and what I feel most comfortable with. So for instance, if I'm going to the right, it does not make sense for me, at least, as a right-handed person. Again, right-handed means that I have the right hand. That I have the forefinger and the thumb, on the ferrule of the tool right here. And what that, yeah, there we go, just right in here. So that's a right-handed cut, like this. Right hand on the tool, that's a right-handed cut. Left-handed means that's going to be a left-handed cut. So if I'm leading with a long point going to the left, here's one of the struggles I have, is that look how far over I am to consistently cut if I'm making a planing cut. Okay, that's no good because I'm too far away from it. Better is it to be able to have the short point leading just so that I can square up to the piece a little bit more. Body mechanics are very important in wood turning. It's not just taking a hunk of wood on the lathe, turning it into a blank, and just hoping that it all works out. That's good when you start, but you want to get to a place where you're understanding technique a little bit more, realizing tools an extension of the body. So with the skew, oftentimes this is the first cut people will make, is just something like this. It's kind of a peeling cut. And that's okay to do because I'm cutting 360 degrees of all side grain. Oftentimes this is incorrect. This kind of material in terms of grain orientation is incorrectly, as I see it, referred to as end grain material. And it depends on how you look at it. It's not end grain material as I see it until you're hollowing end grain out. If it's really, you could call this side grain stock because all I'm cutting is side grain. If I'm slicing correctly, all you're doing is cutting side grain, really. For the most part, unless you're cutting across the grain into the end grain region. That's if you're going across the grain, potentially. So for now, let's go ahead and just burnish the surface. Create a nice, beautiful surface here. Talk about what's going on mechanically when I'm producing this. And maybe do something quite a bit different than have a beautiful surface. Maybe we'll unbeautify it, okay? See what we got. So if we take a look at that, that's a piece of ash right there, and there's no tear out in this at all. That's perfectly smooth. That's something I could start sanding that probably with 400 grit, and that's a good thing. It's never a bad day. But let's go ahead and do something a little different. Let's go ahead and maybe put some catches into this. Talk about how that works. Okay. So we had some fun yesterday creating some catches, some intentional, some not. Let's do the intentional creation of catches and see why it occurs. Okay, catches are an equal opportunity investment of time and energy. or accident, I should say. And so let's talk about that for a minute. So if I'm going to create a catch, and this is good to know, guys, good information for you to have. It's basically this unsupported edge right there. See, the cut's happening right here, and I'm taking off maybe about no more than about half of an inch. That's a great cut. I'm feeling good about it. It's going well. What happens is that unsupported edge drifts in the direction away from the cut. I get a catch just like that. Ever heard that before?
All day, yes.
All day, yes. No, I mean,
All around the room.
all around the world. Catches. All right. That noise. It's that noise. It's like it makes you jump back and you're like, why did I ever get into the skew? I just got started. So if you end up doing this, okay. Ooh, that was a good one. That was a really good one. Okay. And then like that. So guys, if you can create the catch, this is just to show that if you can create a catch. So again, it's like this. You can't if you create a catch and you know how, that's the key to understanding that you don't have to be afraid of the skew. You can make friends with it. Okay, you can be good friends with it. It takes a little time, you know. Not all relationships are easy. This is a difficult one at times, but you can learn to become very good friends. Okay, so if you do this, that's that unsupported edge that drops, it catches. It doesn't matter what direction I go. If I go to the left. And the catch what happened in this case, leading with the short point of the tool and dropping in with the long point. That's where the catch was. So it's no different that if I lead with the left long point and then drop the short point in, same thing will happen. Okay, just like that. So let's take a look at our results. I can see them right now, and they're not desirable. Ooh, so let me, is that helping or hurting? How's the light working or not? Sometimes, light's a funny thing with remotes and LCDs. It looks so much better on TV. I'm trying to make it look really bad. It's bad. Just know that that's really torn out. Yeah, that's good. That's good and torn out. So when you get results like this and you're using a skew, it's a very disparaging pursuit when you're thinking about it that way. So it's good to learn to just take some chunks of wood between centers that are centerwork blanks, that is to say with the grain running alignment with the bed. And I wouldn't say go for that, but learn to develop confidence with that in the right way so that if you do have a catch, know that the only reason you're getting it is because the unsupported edge, that is to say not the one that's down on the tool rest here, that's the supported edge that's cutting, so that's where we're cutting. See that gap right there? That's where the catch occurs. So so here's the opposite of what happens. Let's fix this up and do the right cut. Talk about how what the opposite thing that happens, which is not as dramatic, but still causes a lot of dig-in and trouble, and why people say I'm done with the skew forever. That's typically what happens. Makes me laugh. Not because you're not succeeding with it, but the skew it works one way or the other. That's it. Catches all day or it's brilliant. And the other thing about the skew is that you have to have a lot of finesse with it. Finesse just is a byproduct of ensuring something. That you're pivoting on the tool rest, that the body's supporting the cuts, and that you're not pushing into the material. You're actually pushing down onto the tool rest. That's where the actual pressure is coming from. So I'm just getting underneath these catches. So that's pretty good. I'm going to go ahead and peel cut. Peeling cuts are good. Now that's a scraping cut because I'm just basically intersecting directly with the grain and I'm tearing into it. Not cutting with the grain, tearing into it, across the grain. And that's an okay cut because it gets me beyond the catch, so that's always a good thing. But it gets me to an area that even though I have a decent surface, I'm at a place where I can then take the tool, lead with the bevel first, raise the handle a bit, and get that nice finish. Let's do maybe one more cut. Typically when I say one more cut, I usually mean like 5 more. But I think that time I was actually telling you the truth. So not a perfect cylinder, but something that's shows us, now we're getting back to our normal palette of good right here. That's good right there. That's nice and trued up, and no tear out to speak of at this point. Another form of tear out that we can create with the skew that's troublesome is one not where the unsupported edge is dropping. Thanks for the good video work. Thank you. Not dropping, but rather I realize that if I do drop it, that's where the catch is. And so when you get to that point, this is kind of fast forward beyond the place of finding some initial comfort and ease with the skew, and you're like, okay, I know how to not create catches. Well, why am I still not getting great surfaces off the tool? That probably is a commentary on another thing. Well, if you know that the gap is right here, and that's where it's going to drop, and you're going to get your catch, then what you're going to do is you'll probably have a grip of death here, just ensure that it doesn't drop. If not, then that means you're probably going to push forward that way. Watch what happens here. If we can take a look at that. Nothing happens at all. You say, well, I'm pretty good with the skew. I didn't have a giant catch, but nothing happened, so that's good. I can use the skew. And so what happened right here, that little curl, that little shaving upward, is again showing us a few things. One, that the tear out, the cut ended right there, and so we were going that way. It's curling back this way because I tore the fibers out. And so so that then entails that if I use the skew correctly, I'm not actually taking it right here and then just dropping the supported edge, which is right here. I'm not just dropping it like this, like that. See, that's a good catch. If I drop it too soon, what happens? I can do that, and then I can just have a massive run back like that. So it's good to learn how the skew's actually cutting. If I do something else where I just am right here and then drop this in like that, I have to make sure that there's a gap between whatever the supported edge is. Long or short point doesn't matter. Okay, doesn't matter if it's a long point, doesn't matter if it's short point. But what I cannot do is I can't just drop that edge in like that. That's where I dig in. What I do is I still need to have a little bit of a gap between this cutting edge and the surface. So right here, that's the cut. You can start here again. There we go. Working with the video. You can see what's going on here. Now, if we keep the video right there, that's going to be a good thing to watch, because if I'm to do something and we can keep it there for a second, it should actually look like this, but it doesn't. The dust actually is covering the full supported edge, but you see that right there? That is about the amount of material I have when the tool's in cutting or planing action right in here. There's a gap of about that much right there occurring, okay? So I'm not just dropping that edge right in, okay? If I do that, that can lead to bad things. You're going to probably do this and do that, and then if not, you'll get frustrated and maybe drop the tool back into the unsupported edge and do this. That's what happens with the skew often. And then you're like, okay, screw it. I'm just gonna do this. I'm just gonna peel. I'm gonna peel all day long. So those are some of the pitfalls with the skew, guys. That's it. That's really all it is with the skew in terms of practice. Let's also take a look at a way to. Yes, sir. Mr. Tim.
Me and Roy shared a lathe yesterday, but we also shared the mistake of the catch, but it was, like you say, skate back.
Mm-hmm.
Put a spiral all the way down the wood. I know I did that a multiplicity of times.
You don't call that fine detail? I'm just kidding.
Well, if you've seen my other work, yeah, I guess you could say that. I'm still kind of confused. I know I'm out of position. I understand that.
Yeah.
That it's out of position. But how? I mean, what do I need to do to correct that?
Well, what you need to do is this. So.
Would you just kind of summarize this question, because the audio isn't picking up on the recording?
Oh, can.
Guys go back to watch it later, they're not going to know what you're in. Just sort of summarize what he asked.
Oh yeah. So yeah. Essentially, when you get a spiral like this, there's one right here. What's the result of that? What's the result of the spiral? It's basically it's a result of not having. So it's a more or less in. Is that good to summarize? Okay. What that's a commentary on is kind of being halfway between a full catch. A full catch is what I was starting out with. When I put that full pressure down like this, that's just going to catch right out. When you'll get a run back when you still have a little bit of pressure forward, but you've sort of drifted past what I call a sweet spot. And so you got to. So what happens with the skew is that if you either have most have either a grip of death on it, or they don't, or they have sort of in between that, where they're still exposing too much unsupported edge, as like right here. If we can take a look at that, so right there, that would be unsupported edge. But if you just drop it, that's where you get the full catch. If you still have a little bit of pressure right there, you'll get a run back. So what you have to do is make sure that you're pivoting on that sweet spot, and that all you're really accounting for is the pressure back here to be lifted, to be raised. You just need to make sure that the unsupported edge remains raised, and it doesn't need a grip of death to stay raised. Because what you're doing is you're overcompensating for the fear of having a really bad catch with the grip of death here, and you're saying, please don't, please don't, please don't. And all you really need to do is make sure that you have like a little, like you have like not even a pound of pressure right here, lifting the unsupported edge. But not even lifting, it's just maintaining that position.
So when your tool begins to flatten out, not necessarily that you've lost your gap in your points, but the tool begins to flatten out.
Yes. That's where it starts to run back. Yep. That's where it's at. So.
Get that, Roy? Well, there you are. You're in the room.
All right, so let's true this up and maybe roll some spherical shaped beads. And we'll talk about why this other form of practice is going to be better for us for rolling beads. And go the other way too. You might think that I have a preference in leaning towards going to the right. I can also go to the left, doesn't matter. I find also one last little thing on planing, just because it's what we probably have time for in this little segment, is that if I'm planing, I find that it's easier to plane to the left and to the right with the short point. That's with the short point right here. So a little bit on that. And so I'll go ahead and true this up now. I'm essentially aiming to get the best sphere that I can. If I lead to the left with the long point, this is now the long point of the tool, long point. The tendency and the issue with leading with the long point is that it's likely going to dig. So you just have to be careful with that. Same philosophy applies, that I don't want to think of this with a grip, that I'm attaching my hands on this with a grip of death. It's the body that's making the cut. And again, the pressure is not going into the material, but rather down. Okay, that's what's going on with it. So now what I'll do is I'll go ahead and roll a few beads. But the beads that I want to roll are going to be more spherical shape. They're going to be wider. So it's going to be from about, that's going to be one right here. Let's roll a few of them. Talk about why. Well, if you roll a bead over a much wider surface, that's where you really learn to understand when the tool is traveling over a wider surface, whether it's going to catch or not, okay? So you can very easily roll a little 1/4-inch bead like this. And I'm not just trying to say that it's so easy. I'm just saying that it's very simple to trick yourself into thinking that if you roll little small beads like that you really know how to use a skew, okay? I would say that a commentary on knowing how to use a skew correctly is to roll a larger bead. Thus, you are the reason for that is because you're traveling over a much wider surface, and when you actually have to drop the handle or raise the handle and raise the handle, dropping the tool into this little or the little V-groove area. Being able to do that effectively over a larger surface will entail that you are keeping better balance, greater balance in that process. So if I start with the bevel rubbing at the center, this leads into another idea. Well, if I roll a bead, should I roll it with the long point or the short point of the tool? I prefer when I start a bead out with the short point of the tool, because with the short point, the short convex point is going to cut more of a convex oval shape. The long point, rather, will cut more of a conical shape. So if I start at the very center, even if I'm rubbing the bevel effectively, let's do something incorrect first. This is what typically happens. That's with the long point, okay? So typically when I'm teaching a class and I'm rolling beads, and we're doing that, this is what I see often, is I see the beginning of something that is going to be very frustrating, is right here, okay? And I'm just going to dig in like that. So if we switch to the short point, watch what happens. It's much better. That means that basically the sweep of the tool or the radius right here is accounting for being able to, instead of dig in more, still with the same pressure applied to the cut that I just made, instead of dig in immediately, we'll sort of cut over the grain on top of it, and I'll create a nice round shape. So if I do this, yeah, it'll dig a little bit, just enough, but it won't dig in terribly, like with the long point. So with beads, if you're really learning to practice beads correctly and cut them well, you have to start at the center, drop the handle, rub the bevel. You're going to be rubbing the bevel right in here. You should see a burnish mark. If not on the TV, I can see it. I know it's there. And then what I'm doing is I'm starting to lift that unsupported edge on this side. You guys can see that side. And again, I don't want to stay right here. That's where I'm going to get a catch this way. I want to go ahead and raise the handle. Again, short point, lead with the short point of the tool or the heel, and roll into that little cleft region. Then what I'll do the same thing to the other side. And what I've done here is we'll be going over here. You'll see that I'm leading with the short point. So both cuts for a spherical shaped bead, which is good practice, short point to the right, short point to the left, okay? And what that does is if you're leading with that the convex portion of the edge, that's going to make sure that you're, one, not digging into the end grain, and two, you're creating a nice, even, wider shape. But doing that means that if you're cutting on a wider length, you're also going to be you're going to need to turn the tool around so that the long point can get down into where the curve breaks on the top portion to get down into the corner. Okay, so if you can make these cuts, you're learning to effectively use the skew with the long and the short point over a longer surface. So the kind of practice that you're getting with it is really, really good. Like, you're really learning how to understand the skew. So now let's go to the left again. Short point. There, and then we'll go ahead and use the long point. You'll see what I've done is that after each section I've created that curve, then I just round it over nicely. Okay, so that's a pretty decent looking bead right there. And I'll go ahead and do one over here. Same thing, short point, that creates my initial convex shape downhill. Short point, same thing. Let's do it again. And then I'll go ahead and lead with the long point on both sides. The difference is that when I use the long point, I'm not starting at the center to do this. If I do that and I start the long point at center, this is what typically will happen. Now I'm trying to just roll a standard bead. Now go ahead and do the same thing. Lead with the long point. This is what I end up with. Some kind of sort of an elbow shaped thing. I don't have a nice round shape right here. I'm looking for something that's round. This is sort of elbow shaped. That's because that the point of symmetry I'm using is the long point right here, starting right there. So if I do this, that will always create a conical shape. Rather with the short point, or if I lead with that, starting at center, that's what's going to fix it. You see what I did right there? I just kind of flattened it out with the small peel cut. Like magic, we can fix that. And let's go ahead and do the other side here. So we fix that. So it's not hard to fix. It's not hard to create either. It just takes a little time to know that if I have a preference, it should be that when I start rolling beads, short point first. Okay, short point. Yes, questions?
So
Rory.
lead off at the top of the bead with the short point.
Yes, on both sides, for left or the right.
The tool is staying pretty much 90 degrees to your wood. You're not angling it off.
No, when I start that cut, it's pretty much right here. I mean, I'm right at 90. I find that I can take a fuller sweeping pass with this grind. If I'm starting, there's another thing too. There's another thing too that helps. You have to make sure that the tool rest is so that when so when you're rolling a bead and you're doing fine detail on spindle work, no matter the kind of spindle work, okay, no matter the kind of spindle work, you have to make sure that when the tool is sitting dead flat, and if it were to scrape, that it should be sitting about the same height. The edge, the cutting edge should be about the same height as the top of the tailstock's live center, rather than the quill, but rather the live center. Okay, the live center should be about right there. Should be about dead even with it. Okay. That'll be helpful for you. Reason for that is this. If I'm to roll with the skew chisel and I'm too low, what's going to happen if we can get okay, yeah, I think that'll work. Thank you for that. If I try to roll this direction, what I'm doing is see that unsupported edge coming around the corner? Well, she will be coming around the mountain when she comes, right? Well, that's going to be the case right here. It's going to be a bad one. What's going to happen if I go to the right, that unsupported edge is going to lift, boom, right into it, right there. So we do need to make sure that the height of the tool rest, when at 90 degrees, sitting flat, that the edge basically is sitting perpendicular to the very top of the live center when we roll beads. If not, you'll be catching all day long right down here. You'll just be bringing that unsupported edge in, boom, boom, boom. It doesn't matter the direction, to the left or to the right. So that's just a little food for thought about that, okay? Let's maybe make these kind of pretty. I can't stand but see a bead with a broken curve in it, or a broken curve in it. I got to see a nice, pretty curve on both sides, and then we'll be good. We can move on to being able to we're going to cut across the grain now. So we'll be done with this. We're going to get this into a chuck. Take a look at some other ideas. Here's the cut. I also find that if you're making these cuts, it's a lot easier to go underhand. But that's for me. That's an opinion, not a fact. There are far more opinions than facts in wood turning, okay? And, I like to make sure that the things that I'm saying are, if they're factual, I better be able to tell you why. And people get used to we can get so used to what we do, we can think that everything we do are facts. No, they're just opinions. Most of them are opinions. There are facts, though, and the facts are important because they'll probably, keep your teeth in. You'll probably save your skin. So let's go ahead and make these nice and pretty. Nice spherical shaped bead. That's a good one. I'm happy with it. And let's do that to the other side. Spherical shaped bead. Again, I'm starting, as you were saying, Rory, I'm going ahead and leading. I'm starting with the tool at about 90 degrees. It's starting at 90. 90. And again, with that soft sweep, I can expose a little bit more edge, as long as the tool rests a little bit higher. Remember, cutting edge is the same height as the live center. That's where I want to be. What that does is it makes sure that when I sweep the tool, the unsupported edge is swept out of the way of the oncoming end grain. It's not sweeping into it. It's sweeping over it. You want to sweep over it, not into it. Okay? And roll it around to the long point. Right in there, okay? Let's do the same thing on the other side. Let's start with the short point. It's not to say that you can't lead or start with the long point. It's just I find that the tendency is that when you go to the right or to the left, the tendency is that you're going to tear more fibers out and at the same time create a conical shape, which is not a bead. Now, you can roll little beads. Here, let me just finish this cut with a long point. There we go. And those are nice, pretty little beads. Those are good. Good practice. You can roll these little beads all day long over here, okay? You can roll a little 1/4-inch bead, little 1/8-inch bead. And this is not to say this is bad. I'm not denigrating the usage of the tool in this way on smaller beads and saying, oh, that's no big deal. You got to roll one of the big ones to be special or something. That's not what I'm saying. Just saying that you might fool yourself. You might trick yourself into thinking that if you roll little small beads, then you step over to something like this, you'll wonder what the difficulty is. So the difficulty is, again, with the skew, cutting over a wider surface. It's also usually commentary on starting with a long point and leading in and having the height of the tool rest too low, so that when you are rolling the bead, you're bringing up an unsupported edge into it and just kicking out. It just kicks out. So we don't want that. So now I'll go ahead and stop the lathe. I'm going to then chuck up this right here, and we'll go ahead and talk about cutting across the grain, making some other types of cuts with the skew chisel. This will lead into doing some fun projects with the skew, making spinning tops with loose rings. Some of you guys have seen me do that. It's fun to watch. It's fun to see. If you can make one of those things, no one can tell you how to use the skew. It's one of those kinds of things. So we'll keep going. Questions, comments, concerns, heckling. I like heckling too. Heckling's fun. I hope you can take it because I'll dish it out. I'll dish it back. Yes.
What's the angle of your bevel on
So.
the radius?
Good question. and so for any skew, that is, I would say anywhere from about 20 and 25 degrees, 20 or 25. And so so if I'm 20 or 25, that will usually indicate that for most of the bar stocks that you're seeing, the thickness of them, that will usually entail that if you get a 20-degree grind on there, you'll probably be about a 1/16 of an inch longer with the bevel, longer than the width of the bar stock. Okay, so something like this. Okay, we take a look if we can. Oh well, we gotta. Oh, so it's okay. Yes.
Matt, do you sharpen your skew by hand or do you use a jig?
I do not use a jig for this for the skew. The way I see it is that the jig should be the platform. So I would actually like to take a look at sharpening the skew, and we wanted to talk about that and mention that. So let's actually talk about sharpening the skew. The one that you see out there, or I don't know if I got it back, whatever, it's out there somewhere. But that's the grind it's the same grind that I put on all these skews. And so if we could take a look in that, maybe that would be good. Now and the other question I get is, do you take the burr off? Do you like the burr on? I leave the burr on, and I typically will use very I want typically a very micro-serrated edge because I like the material to cut faster. I like to cut the material faster. Okay, and you say, well, wouldn't that just dig in a lot more? Well, it can, but I have a sense of body control, tool mechanics to be able to do that. So what I've learned to do, as for me, this is an opinion, I prefer micro-serrated edge because if I get a faster cutting edge, I'm just used to that. I find that I get maybe one more minute of a sharp tool. Maybe that's what it comes down to. Really about maybe one more minute. So when it comes to a burr on a tool, which side do I prefer? I typically want to see the burr on, and I'll. Yes, please, if we can. So I typically like to see the. There we go.
You got it. I'm not gonna.
We're good. No.
Face it.
Yeah, good. I'm glad. Yeah, yeah. This game gets interesting. It can get interesting.
You do it intentionally.
Yeah, I figured. Yeah, I figured that out yesterday. Yeah, yeah. You guys are fun. You guys are great. So typically I want the burr on the top side of the tool. You say, well, why is that the top side of the tool? It would be my opinion that the reason I view this as the top side of the tool, but more or less in terms of in spindle turning, I'm typically working from right to left. And so that means if I'm making peeling cuts, it's starting from the tailstock moving in. Why? The reason for that is because if I have material here that hasn't been trued up, in theory, I have a greater amount of mass or weight on this side still because I haven't touched this side yet. So I'd rather start from right to left, or rather over the tail, from the tailstock, move my weight towards the headstock, so that I can account for the mass of the square stock that has not been turned yet, so that I can get in theory a better cut on this side. What I've then over time looked at then is, okay, well, why is the burr on the underside? I'd rather have the burr on the top of the rake so that when the oncoming wood's spinning, it's hitting that side first. So I typically in making peeling cuts over here first. So it's just been that what I've done in my kind of turning has always been that I would get a little bit more time. I would get maybe another minute or two of sharpness because of that. And so that's just why. If I started from this side in, I probably would, with respect to peeling, because I like to use this as a peeler as well, I'd probably put it on the underside, or on this side right here. That's with the long point facing to the right. So I just, as the way I've developed and made the predominant or majority amount of peeling cuts, having it on the top of the rake right here with the long point facing the headstock. As you can see here, that's typically where I want it. So when I sharpen the skew, the thing that's most important about it, and the most effective thing, is to make sure that when I'm doing that, that I put the burr on one side, obviously, or actually that I sharpen both sides. One of the things that I see that can become an issue when you're sharpening is creating this kind of thing over here, where you see that where you look at the cross section of the tool, and you should see that the cross section of the tool. Yeah, thanks. Is nice, and it's a nice prominent apex where if I were to draw a line right down the center of it, you would see that there we go, right there. You can see that that's perfectly angled nicely.
Zoom on this. Which zoom?
So the angle on both sides is
The same, yeah. You want it to be the same, and so see that right there. That's what you want. You want to see a nice apex going down the very center of the bar stock right there. You don't ever want to get into a habit of when you're sharpening to just sharpen one side and then do that again and then do that again and then like 3 to 5 sharpenings. you're going to get this to where if you were to draw that straight line down the tool, oh, not there anymore. That's not what you want. And so you say, well, what's the big deal? Anyway, big deal is that if you get used to the point of symmetry being in alignment with the bar stock at 90 degrees, that is to say that the point's running dead center and through it, then if that's going to change every so often, enough to where you will not have a reliable sense of muscle memory developing with that tool. So you want to make sure that when you sharpen a skew, you always sharpen both sides. Yes, Rory?
Didn't you also say that the bevel length ought to be about?
Bevel length should be about a 16th to 1/8 of an inch, about longer than the bar stock. And the reason I find that is that if it's too short, the bevel, that is, the length of the bevel, that's from the heel of the tool, heel of the overview of the tool to here, should be about a 1/16 of an inch longer than that thickness right there, 1/16 to 1/8 of an inch, which that is right there. That means that it will, as I see it, you can make effective peeling cuts with it. If it's too short, the tendency is that it'll be a little bit too blunt. The pressure and the blunt pressure that you'll then apply in those peeling cuts, say for instance, if you have a piece chucked up, if you take a little bit too much off, it's gonna impart too much vibration. The piece might come flying off. So I find that you do need to have a little bit of length in the bevel, just a little. And I find that if you grind it about 20 to 25 degrees and you ensure that you're right there, then you'll be where you need to be. If you're at 30 or 35, and I typically have a little angle gauge that I check to see where mine's at. Right here, I just use this. So let me see where this is at. I'm guessing this is 25. I'm gonna guess 25. That's at 25 exactly. So if we can see where, it's hard to see on this thing, so I'll show you guys. We can talk here in a little bit when we take a break, but essentially right there, that's where my angle is. I'm reading that angle. I'll show you how I'm doing it. It's kind of confusing to see that, but nonetheless, 25 degrees will ensure you need to be where you're at. So when I sharpen the skew, one of the things I need to do is I need to make sure that on the long point of the tool, I'm not rotating it and bringing it through a wide. Oh, that's a great view, because it's good to see the body mechanics with this. So thank you for that. So yeah, this will be a good view. So right in here, that's what I want to see. This side represents. Let's being that we can't get that close, perhaps. Let's just assume this is what we can get for video. That's good enough. This represents the side with the long point of the tool. Okay, that's the long point. There's my long point right there. What I don't want to do is do this. What that's going to do. That's going to round it over so you get something that looks kind of like that. I don't want to have a rounded section. And some might say, well, I prefer a round on both sides because if it's round, that means I won't get a catch. No, you still get a catch. It may not happen as quickly, but you'll still get one. Because a longer radius will entail that you can use just more of the edge at once. So you might get some courage and say, hey, well, I don't have a point there at all. I'll just take that thing up there at 45 and I'll just go ahead and plane and make it beautiful. Well, you won't, because you need actually a long point to dress the full length of that, the full convex edge. It's quite a bit better to have that long point, or to have a long point there, for the sake of peeling as well. You don't want to have that issue. So when I'm sharpening this tool, I'm sharpening the underside first. This would be the underside with a long point facing the right. That's going to put the burr on the underside, okay? And then I'll turn it around, and my second grind will be here on this side. So what I'll do is I'll sharpen it both right and left-handed, just so you can see the motion, and so I can get out of the way so that you guys can see the tool happen. So first, oh, okay. Okay, sure.
Hey, Matt,
Yeah.
so the skew you use, and who makes that? Who's production?
So I have a shipment of tools that's coming from. I'm a Robust Tools dealer, and I also sell all their tools. So we'll talk to you about that, and I can get you the tools that you need. This is actually a Carter and Son tool, but the ones I'm brand new. I'm one of their brand new dealers. So I actually have the timing of the shipment didn't turn out right. I'll have their tools next. I'll have their tools probably about next week, but I have a bunch of tools coming. So we can talk about tools and all those things that you need. But yeah, this would be Carter. In general, I prefer a thicker stock tool for a skew, so I can absorb a little bit more vibration dampening. Let's see where we're at. Okay, can we? Oh, higher? How's that? Stay. How about right? Can you guys see that okay? Kind of, sort of?
Just hold it there, Gerald.
There we go. Okay. Wow, really making you work, man.
It would really be shaky.
Working.
I was hoping.
Okay, so let's sharpen the long point first. Let's take a look at that section. If that's the long point, if this is the long point right here, what I'm not going to do is go this way and round that over. I want the highest point of symmetry on that side to be nice and not rounded. That's just a soft swept radius means that if I start here, I can rotate all I want in here. On this side, that's the short point. But on this side, I start about right here. Keep that at 90. But I return to that 90-degree position, like that. So again, I can do this all day long. Return at 90. And that's what we should get, okay? That's the grind. That's what you want to see. Now that puts the burr on the underside of the tool. I'm going to go ahead and turn this around and do the other side. Actually, yeah, there we go. So now we're going to do the top, what I would refer to as the top side of the tool. Remember, that's with the long point facing the left. That's to say, if I'm going to do most of my peeling cuts starting from the tailstock moving to the left. That's typically how you're doing that in spindle turning. That's why I want the burr on this side. Thank you. Appreciate that, Phil. I got plenty. I got plenty. So I'm starting right here, 90 degrees. Same thing. At the 90-degree point, that's the long point. I'm not doing any of this. But I'm going to start doing any of that only with the short point. That's where the curve breaks. So I can do that. So here, 90 degrees. Move it to the left. The other thing about grinding is this, and we'll talk about that grind. So there we go. Here, nice and pretty. And then nice and pretty right there. So that's good. The other thing about grinding in terms of body mechanics is this, guys. Nice burr right there. It's good. It's not even hot. It's not nice to hand someone a hot tool or a sharp tool. If you hand them a sharp and a hot tool, man, you're not very nice. Here, Gerald. Yes, sir. Yeah.
So you're not holding the tool flat on the rest. You're bumped up. You're off the bottom of the rest, supposed to be your hand.
So right in here, so basically what I'm doing, I'm keeping that flat right in there. Now,
But it's not making contact all the way down on the.
yeah, and so what I have to do, just because the length of that's just a little shorter, that's a little shorter, so I just have to make, just kind of just compensate for that, best that I can. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, so that's one of the issues that I have with this, not with this particular rest. This is probably the best aftermarket rest. I find that it's better to have the thinner one. I like the thinner one a little bit better. That's nice. But typically, what you don't want to do, so when you have a situation like that, you just you deal with it as you can. The trouble though is, if you really want to, what you really want to do to maintain being flat is you don't want to raise the handle right here. So that means that you want to have 2 points of contact with the fulcrum, 2 fulcrums here, flat, and then being a little bit further up here. That's very helpful to swing like that. If you're back here, the tendency is you're going to create this sort of diving board effect, and you'll just be lifting that edge into the stone. Okay, so that's the real issue.
Everything being proper.
Yep.
You want the flat of that tool on the flat of that.
Yeah, you do. Yeah, and I find that it's so I prefer, so in my shop I don't use jigs, but I do use a Wolverine platform, but I don't have the thicker one for the exact reason you just mentioned. I prefer the thinner one just because what can happen on for different manufacturers, the skew will bottom out at some point, and then you'll be rocking around. So you just have to be careful with that. I would just say. The wider rest is great. It's good to have 2, one wider and the shorter one that they make too. The shorter one's the only one that I use. So yes.
And I remember yesterday you said it's important to sharpen side A, around the B.
Yes.
Back to A and back to B to keep those angles.
Well, as long as, well, you just need to do it once. So you sharpen the underside and then the top side every time that you do it. So when you sharpen a skew, you're not making one pass, you're making two passes every time. Underside, top side, and that's it. And so you just have to make sure, and I like to make sure to keep the burr on. Some people take that off. That's fine. That's okay if the last cuts then are just for burnishing. That's something that Alan Lacer promotes, and that's great. That's what he does, and that's good. I find that you need more than you can create as burnished of a surface with the burr on. But either way, by the time I get to making those cuts, I'm not even concerned about the burr. I just want a tool that's sharp enough, that's not dull, that I'm relying more so on the body mechanics than ensuring that I can burnish the surface. It's going to be burnished anyway. So that's how I see it. Anyways, I want to get on to, and where are we for time for morning?
It's 10:40, so maybe an hour.
Hour? Okay, perfect. That's great. That's perfect.
Break for lunch, and we're gonna come back after lunch.
Okay, perfect.
Real quick while he's setting that up.
Perfect.
If you guys have not paid, see Kevin, raise your hand. For the members, it was
Oh.
40, non-members 35. You're okay.
May I ask,
One
you
time
got that
only.
CBN wheel right there, why do you not use it? I mean, it's supposed
Good
to
question.
catch me out.
It is a cat's meow. I don't prefer CBN. Most professionals don't.
Why is that?
Because most of us that are doing, at least us as in production turners, I'm very specific to what kind of turner I am. So I make traditional classic form work, and so I'm looking for something that I can get a micro-serrated edge because I want faster cutting action. Usually, I've found that over time, again, what I was saying a little bit earlier was just, and didn't touch on it too much, was that I like to have because I have the micro-serrated edge, I think that I typically find I can maybe another minute or two of a sharp edge. So every tool manufacturer is going to tell you, oh, we're the greatest ever. And so fair enough. The reason they talk to us is because we actually do the work. So what that means is that how much time do you really get with the micro serrated edge or and the burr? You get 20 seconds of a burr. You get about 5 minutes of a sharp tool if you're lucky, maybe. Maybe a little bit longer if it's green. A little bit longer if it's green. A couple minutes. But if I'm working with dry stock, which I often do in my trade work, that is to say, people ship me the material, I make it, I ship it back out. I find that the ceramic stone is something that I prefer. So that I like to see the sparks go over the edge or into the flute, and you see that with the ceramic. You won't see that as much with CBN. You certainly won't heat up the tool as much with the CBN. So CBN is a cat's meow. I mean, it is the better wheel, I think. But I prefer, and a lot of professionals prefer ceramic, just because I want a more abrasive edge.
Okay, how long will that ceramic wheel last you?
Last me, not very long. I go through wheels pretty quick. I mean, I usually get a wheel per year. I get one wheel per year. I'll just get one wheel per year. And even if it's still good, I throw it out and get a new one, balance it. Most important thing for me in my shop's a grinder. So when I and it's perfect where it is. It's not even 2 steps away. My rule is, the thumb is usually no more than 2 steps away. So where the grinder should be located, that is. So yeah. That help answer your question? Yeah. Yeah, good. So yeah, no, I would say no, use CBN's great. CBN's great, and I would recommend CBN to most people. I wouldn't say, hey, you got to do, be a production turner like me, use ceramic. That opinion isn't terribly popular to use ceramic anymore. It's just not. But I prefer it for reasons of just being able to, as I see it, a little bit cleaner cut. So I'm just going to center this, or not cleaner cut, but I can get about maybe another minute. So that's all leading with the bevel too. You're making cuts that way. So we're just going to do this, center that. This should be a little out of round. That's okay. We're going to go ahead and make sense of that here in a minute.
Matt, may I ask you a question?
Yes.
Yesterday, when you started out with square stock, you made a couple of cuts in it. One purpose of that was to determine grain orientation.
Yes.
So you're predominantly cutting from tailstock to headstock. Do you ever
That's if I'm doing spindle work. Yeah. If I'm doing traditional spindle work, that would be that case. Yeah.
Do you ever find it advantageous to flip that stock around to take advantage of the grain orientation? Was that predominant?
I've not. No. I haven't really thought of it that way. But no, that's good. Good question. Good thought. I appreciate that. So now I'll go ahead and go with a smaller skew. Now we'll work across the grain. This is a little out of round, but that's okay. We're going to go ahead and chew this up here in a minute. Let's just go ahead and have a little bit of tailstock support. I'll start at my favorite speed, which is actually 0 for the moment. Let's get this going. And went from 0 to something a little bit faster pretty quick. There we go. And you guys will see that I'm just going to go ahead and create some offcuts here. That's leading with the short point. This will help us to take a good look at what's going on in terms of grain orientation, understand that with the smaller piece. So we're just stringing this up, still doing a little bit of practice. That's all with the long point. And we can slow that down a little bit. We just want to create a little offcut here. So it's good to kind of play around with some firewood, guys. It's kind of what we're doing a little bit, just so we can do some practice. It's never a bad thing. Okay?
How fast did you have it just in?
That was probably at about 2200 RPM. Oh, this right here, yeah. Those are just a couple spherical shaped beads. That's good right there. Oh, careful. If I threw it, I felt like I was going to throw it like right in your coffee, you know. I felt like I was going to like dunk it in your coffee. Yeah. All right. So let's go ahead and take a look at cutting across the grain now, guys. We could be cutting with the grain. Let's cut across it. So with the skew, what I don't want to do, as we learned in this last little bit, is that if I lead to the right or to the left, long or short point, and I drop the handle, that's where I get my catch. We've seen it enough. I'm tired of doing that. I just want to cut the wood clean now. Let me cut the wood clean, you know? The tool rest is about the same height, yes. And that would be to say that you take a look here at the very end, that's nowhere near the nose right there. So if I'm on that exterior diameter, yeah, I'm starting from the very center and then raising the tool up just a little, propping it up just a little bit more, okay? That's about where I'm at. So in order to create the blank, to create good cuts first, so we're free of most of the vibration, I'll start just truing it up. And we've for the most part done that, for the most part. Okay? And if we work across the grain and true it up, one of the issues is that, and now again, I'm lowering the tool rest a little bit to get down to an area that when I get to the very bottom of the nose right here, I'm not in a position like this. That's with the handle into the armpit. I want to have it still underneath the armpit when I'm raising it the highest, so that the nose of the tool is going directly at center. But again, the handle itself isn't raised too high up in here. Okay, so if I want to make a cut this downhill, I can go with the short point. This is with my short point leading. The other would be with the long point leading. Short point, long point. Okay, so it doesn't matter which I use. I just have to remember one key thing is that if I am to make a cut across the grain, that I have to do something a bit counterintuitive, which is to say that I have to roll the tool or actually rotate the unsupported edge that would give me my catch the same over here, like that. That's a catch here. Well, I have to roll that edge in to the end grain here, like that, in order to make the cut. So it's a matter of ensuring that when I make that rotation, that I find the sweet spot and I just glide across the surface, like this, okay? If I glide across the surface, that's ensuring that the kind of cuts that I'm making are in a place that I'm not just on the nose of the tool right here and staying there. Again, if I just do that, I can make the cut, but I have to rotate the tool this way. That way a little bit, so that unsupported edge can actually finish making the cut. All the way to the very end, just like that. Okay. Now, again, this is what really goes to show the kind of curve that I'm going to get, the kind of edge. If I lead with the long point, I'm going to get a conical shape. Okay, it's a very clean cut. If I lead with the, and that's a good one. If I lead with the short point, I get more of an outward set convex shape. That's more oval. And I kind of do both. I kind of like both. So what I can do now is make something like a little spinning top. And let's go ahead and make this straight off the tool, no sanding. You can pass this around. But let's do it with the skew. Okay? And we're also going to talk about a good method for peeling when I'm done with the base section of the top and then get down into the stem. There's a way to do that pretty effectively. And that's something that Raffin taught me. And I didn't really mention it, but I was one of Richard Raffin's people that actually trained me. So my training and background with that I was very fortunate to work with a guy like Raffin. I actually have one of his pieces in here. You guys can take a look at that here in a little bit. This is one of Raffin's pieces. We actually traded. I gave him a little box like the ebony box that you guys saw. He said, you pretty much got to the point now where you've made it in wood turning, you've done well. He gave me that piece for free. It was a beautiful thing. And we exchanged pieces. That's from Richard Raffin's Verdigris series. And I carry that thing around me just like one of my personal prizes in life. That's one of my favorite things. It's hard every time I have to leave though, because that's in my display cabinet at home. So it's kind of hard, but I love to travel with that piece because I take a piece of Raffin with me everywhere, like literally. So that's a good thing. So anyways, let's go ahead and take a look at making a standard spinning top. Let's just burnish the whole thing. Cut some fine detail, why not? Got to make some fine detail out of it, so I stop right there. Why don't I go ahead and use the skew long point. The thing to remember is that if I'm going to make a spinning top that spins, well, you got to spin it to win it. If you're spinning it to win it, that means that you're not dancing around on a point. The top will eventually flatten right at the point. So what you got to do is you got to flatten it now. You might as well just put a little flat spot right there. It's going to be flat anyways, okay? So we'll make something kind of traditional, but has a little bit of flair. The thing that I'm being careful of though is that I got to make sure that when I'm making these cuts, you don't just kind of run off and start making the stem section now. Reason for that is because, like in spindle turning, you have to account for the mass. You have to the cuts that you create have to be accounted for with respect to the mass that you have on the headstock side. So that same thing here, much shorter section. But what this allows me to do is what all this material here allows me to do is make cuts over there. It looks like I got a little cut right there. Well, no, that's a cute little one. Yeah, no, it's fine. That's good. So anyway, what I want to do is make all my cuts here first. So I've done that, and then I'll go ahead and start making a little section in here. That's kind of a V-groove, just kind of opening that up with a V-groove. And then I can make a nice peel section in here. You see that when I'm making a peel, this is a really interesting kind of peel cut. That's a standard peel cut right here, where I'm just scraping in here, raising the handle. Pretty standard, nothing really special about that cut. This peeling cut's a little different because I'm basically angling in with a long point, and then I'm switching, raising the handle, and then going into this side. And so what I can do, that's a fast, rapid peel. That's a technique I learned from Raffin that I like to use a lot, where it's a faster peel like this. And that gets down to the stem section faster. So I'm down there just like a parting tool, but I'm cutting a much wider section, okay? And that's a small enough diameter. It's maybe close to 1/2 inch. I still have this mass supporting the cut. What I don't want to do right now is think that I can just take all this material down and keep doing that, which is a tendency for all of us wood turners. We start making shavings, and then we want to make more shavings and more and more and more. That leads to then being able to, if I wanted to make cuts over here, well, it's not available anymore. Don't have the mass available. So when I make a downhill cut into a corner like this, though, I don't want to use the short point. So that's my short point. I want to be leading with that long point so I can go straight down into it. Okay? I also find that working underhand is what I prefer. Reason being is that I feel like I'm not putting as much pressure into the material. If I'm overhand, like this, okay? Like that, like this, like that. Tendency is that what I'm doing is I'm pushing into the material. This is a finesse project. This is not something that is like going outside and throwing an axe at a tree, okay? Just like that. And so all the cuts you're seeing are all just finger control, okay? So what we should be looking at is something that's shear burnished. That is to say that we're not cutting with the raw edge. We're starting with the bevel here, rubbing, making a burnish cut, going downhill. Okay, here we're going downhill here on that side. Okay, and what I can do is, if I wanted to, I can still at this point decide if I want to actually have that shape there or not. So I have enough material there to be able to account for taking that away. And it's good to show that, just so that if I want to make any more cuts now, this is the material that's allowing me to advocate for still being over here, okay? So this is kind of the very tail end. So if I wanted to make a design change, I can, okay? And maybe I will. I kind of like what's going on here. Give me a little counterweight on this other side. That's good. And then if I decide to, maybe I'll just get rid of this thing right here too. Maybe I'll get rid of that little finial at the end. I'll keep the shape though. I kind of like the shape. But watch the cut is that I'm starting with the bevel rubbing here. Raise the handle. That's my unsupported edge. You can at this point see the merit of having the tool rest placed a little bit higher. I don't ever want to have a position, again, if I'm rolling a bead, where I'm bringing that unsupported edge and basically just drifting it and bringing it directly into the end grain section. Don't want to do that, okay? Just want to create a standard little cut right there. That's good. Something simple, okay? But we'll do it with the skew. You do it with the skew, then you're in good business. You're in good shape. So now that I'm done with that and I've made a decision that I'm finished with that section, okay? Now I'll go ahead and keep moving to the left, okay? This will just be a simple top, but if you can do it with the skew, that means that you're on par with it. You're using it pretty well. That was just to true up the end grain. There's my end grain right here. What I don't want to do is, so when I'm truing up the end grain, I take off just a tiny little, probably about 1/16 of an inch or less of material. That's with the long point. And I basically rotate the tool forward like this. Again, that's my unsupported edge. If I drift too much this way, that's where I get a really bad catch that way, okay? And comes right out. So let's go ahead and call this area the stem. When I get down to a smaller diameter, I'm mostly concerned with, this piece not coming flying off, right? Smaller stem indicates that I have to be very careful. And so what I'll do is do just that. And I'm being careful by way of the support from the fingers right here. And there we go. Getting a nice little stem there. All right, it's a little thick. Let's go ahead and thin that out. And I'll do that leading with the short point here. Just make something simple and sweet. A terminology that I coined recently is that you have to find the sweet spot with the skew chisel. But you know how you go to a restaurant and you eat a dessert or a brownie or something, and you say it's too rich, right? Well, if you get a catch, you just say it's too rich of a cut. It was a little too rich. Because if it's on the sweet spot, it was going really well. If you expose the unsupported edge, it's too rich of a cut. Okay. Sometimes the terminology we use in wood turning sounds too abrupt, and I don't know, if you can create your own little language with it, I think it's fun. When I travel from town to town, everyone's got their own language as to how they view wood turning, see it, understand it. It's very interesting as a professional on the road. Very interesting to me. So anyway, so we're almost there with this one. We can get this one passed around just so we can take a look. And then we're going to get a really cool project on the lathe made out of bubinga. But it's fun to make these and just shear cut them straight off the tool. And looks like we're just about there. Let's go ahead and I'll do underhand just so you guys can take a good look. Simple top. Why don't we go ahead and put a little V-groove there? Probably wouldn't be able to do that if I didn't have the fingers there, but here we are, lo and behold. There's that. Just like that, straight off the tool. I'll shear cut. And you guys can see that end grain is nice and clean. Well, he's like, you got to say, pass it around. I'll take a look myself. I'll decide if it's clean. That's what you got to say. Okay? And so let's go ahead and use the board. I would have been so much happier in school when I was growing up if we just spun tops on boards all day instead of do this. So there we go. That should be a good one. Yeah, that's a spinner. And then a good top will spin upside down, at least as I see it. We see it here. Let's go. Nice catch.
Thank you. It's the only thing I got.
It's better than the way you park cars.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I parked it correctly.
He
Y'all
did.
failed in looking.
You did. That's the truth. That's the truth.
There were no directions with
Okay.
parking though.
So guys, I'll come out here if you guys missed the spin.
Yesterday
Yeah.
morning, Tim was kind and parked Matt's car for him.
Oh, thanks.
Came time to leave, it took us 45 minutes to find the car.
Yeah.
It was right behind the building.
It was right behind the building. Actually, no.
40 yards
He-
where he was standing.
Tim put it in like the best, like the most obvious and the best place you could, and none of us could find it. It was,
Behind the hay, behind the air
yeah,
conditioner.
yeah. So yeah, no, don't give Tim a hard time. We're messing with him right
Oh, we're
now.
giving him a hard time.
Yeah, okay,
I'm used
good.
to it.
Oh, I'm so glad to hear you. So thank you, Phil. Yeah, still give him a hard time.
I'm good for it.
Anyway, so that's a pretty good top. A good top would be one again that spins upside down as well. That's good. You guys can mess around with this one. That's all shear cut straight off the tool. And I would say an even better top could be one if I do a little snap of the fulcrum right here, right now. It'll spin. There we go. It spins. That's a winner. So now we'll get something. We'll get a project material on. And Tim, you want to start out with that?
Sure.
Move that around. You guys can take a look at that.
Yeah.
Oh, this guy.
Not bad for first
Yeah,
try.
not bad. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, if you're into that sort of stuff.
What's a good indicator when you
I won't live long enough to do that.
If you say to yourself, then you need to sharpen it. Yeah. If you say, so what I don't want to do is, when musicians practice with metronomes, but they don't, but they don't have a metronome when they're playing a song, saying, oh, I should practice my rhythms now. They're playing a song. So that's a strange analogy, but what it means to say is that you shouldn't have a timer that says, 5 minutes is up, it's time to sharpen. Just be aware of it. Be aware of it. Yeah, be aware. So if you're saying, yeah, you need to go back. Yeah.
Need the other bar?
I think I might. Where is that other bar?
Two bars.
It's not.
Somewhere.
Is it in the top drawer of the box or you?
Where is that other bar? Oh, there we go. Yep.
Excuse me.
Imagine that.
I am giving you a hand.
Yeah.
I enjoy it. I have got to leave.
Okay, no,
And I
good.
have learned a ton.
Oh, good. I'm glad you're here.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm glad we got to take a look at sharpening a little bit. Have a good one. Thank you for showing up. Yeah.
See you, Larry.
See you, Larry. See you there. I'm sorry. Okay.
See you.
Appreciate it.
Good to see you.
You want to buy this back?
Yeah, right. Oh, thank you. Thanks, but no thanks. Thanks, but no thanks.
All right, appreciate it.
Okay. Guys, I apologize for this right now. I'm just trying to... There we go. Okay, finally. So now, guys, we're going to take an exotic piece right here. Got this nice piece of bubinga. We got a little time. What do we got? Half hour? Yeah. Half hour? Okay, perfect. Half hour is going to be good. Now we're going to take a look at a fun little project right here. This is a piece of bubinga. We're going to do the same thing, but we're going to do a very fun thing, a difficult thing, if we can do it, okay? We're going to make a spinning top like that, similar to it, but make it very ornate, and we're going to put a loose ring on the stem. We're going to do the whole thing with the skew, okay? So if we can do that, then we're in good business. It'll be a good break into lunch. So it's the only piece of bubinga I have with me, so I better do it. I like pressure. Pressure, pressure, pressure. Let's do it right. And again, I'll go ahead and center this as is. I'll initially start with the tailstock support. See where we're at.
Matt, do you have a
Yes, sir.
preference for dovetail versus straight or
Dovetail versus...
your straight?
Okay, so yeah, when it comes to chucks, Yeah, I typically, now if I'm holding end grain like this, what I would prefer having is, would be long nose jaws that are, the shark jaws by Vicmark are my favorite probably to use. So something like this, I'd be using a VM, the smaller Vicmark chuck, the VM100 with the shark jaws. That's typically what I would be using. So do I like the serrated jaws that are dovetailed? I don't see the point in them at all. Because if you're going, they don't make any sense to me at all as a professional. Reason for that is because if I have a dovetail, if I have a jaw with a dovetail on it, that's to hold a dovetail tenon. You say, well, it's better if it's serrated. Well, in theory, it is better. But what is better? A stronger, a deadlier hold that bruises the fibers more, that makes the pieces more out of round. That also, if I'm to have if I have the certain length of dovetail that gets into that it isn't of the quite right perfect length. What could happen is that the serrations will, at the very end of the tenon, will basically kind of overlap, be kind of right at the edge, and it can jar that piece off center a bit from the shoulder. It should be sitting flat against the shoulder in a tenon, so that there's no gaps between the actual shoulder and the dovetail itself. I find that serrated jaws have the tendency to jar a piece off center. That is if the serration hits the end of the tenon, jars it off center. So flat jaws will not do that. Flat dovetail jaws won't. But that isn't to say that you can't ensure that you cut the correct length of tenon every time. You can. I just, as a production turner, I don't want to do that. I just don't have time for that. To me, that's like a silly little task I don't want to do. I don't need to do that. So that's how I think of it. So I have to be careful and mention that there is still merit in using dovetail jaws that have serrated edges on them. That is to say dovetail jaws with serrated edges that are not longer. I prefer the dovetail jaw. They're all dovetail jaws. They're all shaped inward set or for a dovetail, to cut a dovetail. They'll accept that dovetail cut tenon. What's that? All but Nova. Oh, okay, yeah. I call them righty loosey. Righty loosey, because you spin you got to tighten them the other way. I think someone told me just recently that they're like, Matt, they just made the Novichucks spin the right way, or someone told me that recently. I was like, oh, that's nice to hear. Oh well, I'm never going to use them anyways. They're good though. They're decent. I prefer using Vicmark, but I like to use what I have. Okay, that's the end of the story on that. So why don't we go ahead and rough down with the larger skew? Skew demo means that we use a skew. There are no other tools in existence. They don't exist. They are not here. Okay. So what I'm going to do is maybe cut a dovetail. I think it would be nice to cut one first here. If I do that, I need to make sure that I have tailstock support. Okay. If I had the long nose jaws that I'd mentioned, then that'd be different story. I'd be able to grip this piece a little bit longer jaw. As long as it's serrated, I'd be fine. In this case scenario, for you young guys, you new people to turning, you want to make sure that you have tailstock support as much as you can. Okay, that's always a good thing. Okay, a little bit of that, and a little close.
You need to sharpen that tool up?
Yeah, right. That's good. So I'm spinning pretty quick. That's about 2,500 RPM. It's a little quick. Okay. Again, I could come in this way, but I'd rather rough this down. You know you're dealing with the really dense wood when it has that helicopter sound. That's kind of a higher pitched helicopter sound. You're cutting really dense fibers. That's how you know you're cutting really dense fiber. This is going to shear burnish very beautifully. Okay, that's good. I think that being that I'm not going to be making heavier cuts now, being in the jaw this way, being in the jaws just with the end grain section is going to be fine. Let's just true this up. Notice that when I make that cut, it's a small little piece of wood, but the body is making the cut in that it is, and that the movement of the tool I'm only moving my body forward. I'm maintaining that with the right hand. All that pressure remains down on the tool rest like this. So I'm just coming in like this. It's like that. And the left hand just supports the cut a bit. Okay, so that should be okay. And I'm going to go ahead and stop the lathe. Now this stuff's going to this is really, really magnificently beautiful stuff, and we'll probably see it more or less when it actually gets passed around more than anything. Although the cuts that we'll see will be good. I'm going to sharpen this up real quick. The same thing that we looked at before should be at the same diameter, or should be at the same bevel. That is. There we go, both sides, nice and sharp. And nicely shaped. Here we go, don't need this thing anymore. All right, let's do something. Let's do something interesting. So you can see the first cuts that we'll make if I'm so inclined to do so. Really beautiful ones. That's just to ensure that I'm entirely trued up before I actually dive into a project, but that's nice and clean, nice sheer cut, or sheer slice. Okay? And here we go. I'm going to start with the short point leading, downhill. All downhill cuts. Some good shavings in there. I always like to keep these. I don't have a collection. I keep them in here. That's where I keep them, in there. They're in here. Yeah. I'll let you pick some out at lunch. No. I was not planning to say that. I always scare myself a little because I'm like, I say a lot of, like, I'll say it. So, you guys are a lot of fun. But yeah, this is the longer shaving that we want to see, though, is that one right in there. The trouble is that because I have that little tailstock, the little dimple from the Live Center, I want to go ahead and maybe true this up a bit. I think it's going to be better that I don't have the greatest hold in the world just because I'm gripping onto just solid stock, not a tenon without a shoulder. I think it's going to be easier that if I make this cut, or better, when I get down in here, I don't want to be pushing in like that. I'd rather be making a sheer cut just to make sure I true that up nicely. And I have to make sure that I'm also getting rid of that dimple entirely. I don't want to have that there. I don't want to have a, yeah, there we go. A nice hole at the very end. That's good. Okay, that's nice and pretty. What the ideal situation here is that when I want to cut the wood clean enough so that my sanding will basically be at probably about 400, 600. So that's all sheer burnish.
How old were you when you started?
I was maybe 18, about 18. And when I started, I wasn't that good. I had talent, but I couldn't steer it anywhere. I decided that what am I going to do? Build furniture, or do that, build cabinet. It was like cabinetry, production cabinetry, doing some things like that. And then I decided, no, I'm going to take an actual apprenticeship. It was really strange journey in life, but I had an opportunity to be able to have an incredible traditional furniture apprenticeship. And that led to me to be able to actually to get into trade turning, where I was making other people's work. I was making for Shackleton Thomas, and I currently to this day still make all of their bowls. So it's a nice situation. But this is the kind of, and we can talk more about that. And guys, I'm happy to answer all the questions you have too that are otherwise related. So thank you for that. This is the kind of shavings we want to see, though, guys. Let's see that. Try to not chase the camera around too much. That's what we want to see. Okay, we should be creating a bird's nest. It's a bird's nest. It's like that. Should be looking like that. So good shaving. Nice and sheer cut. Straight off the tool. That should shine like the moon. See that? Kind of, sort of. Yeah, it's a pretty good shine on that. Again, we don't want this to be pointy. We want it to be pointy enough that when it jumps around, so that instead of jumping around, it actually spins. The reason that top spun really smooth and would be a good candidate for a spinning contest, is because it's not pointy, but rather sheer cut at the end and flat. Okay, that's why that worked out so good. So that's a good shape. I could stand that with 400 right now. So now what I'll do is I'll find an area where I'll go ahead and where the end of the top will be, or rather the end of the where the area that spins, the base, and it looks to be a good area. go ahead and do my peeling cut. When I do this, it's not one solid peel. It's a couple cuts at once. It's one here, and then here, see? So if you do that fast enough, you can really get that action down into an area where you're down in there a little pretty quick. You could do that with a parting tool, but you can do the same cutting action works well with the skew with the soft radius. So the soft radius skew will be great for that. I can make a little peel cut right here. That's with the short point, but it doesn't matter because I'm not aiming to create a perfect peel cut. Just get the material a little bit closer to the stem. So now that I've done that, I'll go ahead and do some shear cuts downhill. This is something you guys get to keep. I want your guys' club to have this piece. What's that? Highest bidder. Or what you could do is you could do a spinning contest for it. Be fun to do a spinning top contest, and whoever wins gets this top. That's an idea. I don't know. Yep. Oh. Oh, you guys are great. You guys are a lot of fun. Oh, man. So let's now get down to the stem. And what we want to do is we want to take a look at, a little bit of a, I got to move that down. There we go. What we're looking to do, guys, is actually get a loose ring on the stem, which we'll do here in a minute. What I'm aiming to see and have is clearance. I need clearance. And let's go ahead and find that. And that's looking pretty good. I'm happy with that. So the whole point is that if I create a bead if I create a loose ring, I need to cut a bead first, okay? And that's a pretty good diameter to start with, so I'm down to maybe about 1/2 inch right there, right in this area. Notice how I'm tapering uphill right in there, not because that's the direction I want to cut, but what I want to do is make sure that I have a little bit more mass and more material at the near this portion right there, near that area, okay? That allows me to make cuts in here a little bit more consistent and stable, okay? That mass goes a long way, but that's all shear cut. I'm happy with that. It's decent. Again, the nose of the top or the base, the bottom of it, however you want to call it, the cone section, that's not sharp. It's sharp-ish, but it's been flattened with a shear cut, okay? And what I'm looking to do now is take a look at where I'm going to have the clearance to be able to go onto the underside of the curve that's begun, this taper here, and this taper here on that side. And so what I'm aiming to do is find a spot that allows me to move the long points to the left and to right of where the bead will be. Let's just say that's where the bead will be, right at the very center. Let's go ahead and mark that. And is that a good spot, is the question. I'd say so. It's not getting me to an area that if the bead were placed further towards the base of the top, that I'm going to be hitting it right there with the tool, with the actual stock of the tool, the square stock. Don't want to do that for obvious reasons. Get down to a smaller diameter. We've come this far. I don't want to ruin it. Okay, it's not my prerogative. And so let's go ahead and assume that that's going to be a good spot to have a loose ring break free. Okay, so we're just going to mark this out right here. Just like that, okay? It's kind of like painting wood, you know? I like to think of it like painting wood. Anyone who knows who Bob Ross is? So it's like you're not painting happy trees, you're painting happy beads. So it's like that, you know? In this case. What? So anyways, that's a pretty good sized bead. It's too large. But either way, we're gonna go ahead and fix that. I need to move the tool rest inboard towards this process. Not quite there. That's pretty good right there. That's going to be good. Now I'll go ahead and start with the short point, making cuts that are not so aggressive. Notice how again how that taper. That taper is important. I need to have more material on this side when I do this. Okay. And this looks to be a good area to be able to break a bead free. Essentially, that's all it is. It's a bead. Let's go ahead and see if we can do this. Right in there, and we're going to go ahead and round that over. The thing that we're looking to do is, in this process of breaking this free, is to ensure that we have enough material on both sides of, we need to make sure, that the amount of thickness that we have in the material on the side matches the other side and the actual length. So that's maybe about quarter of an inch, not even quarter of an inch, that's like eighth of an inch. It's very small. And I want to make sure that that on the sides, I got about an eighth of an inch, maybe a little bit more than that, when I break it free, so that, well, stating the obvious, we don't want to, we want this thing to go over well. We don't want to break the bead off. So being that I still have a little bit of material over here, that taper, that's allowing me to, with respect to mass and weight, make these cuts over here. I want to start designing some of this now, if I can. So that's what we're doing. And after this, I'm getting onto a small enough stem near the base of the top. I just don't have any more. There's nothing more I can really do over here. That's about it. So if I wanted to make a cut out here, you're out of your mind. You're not doing it. Not happening, okay? Not happening. So just know that. And what I'm looking to do is probably break the top free from the other side. And what I need to do, though, however, is I need to take that long point here and get onto the underside of the bead in here to about half the length of that bead, okay? So as long as I'm doing that, I should be in good shape. We cut ourselves a little cove. So it's a cove swept little stem right in there.
Matt, you said the depth is about twice the width of
The depth here? I'd say, yeah, in terms of the depth of the bead right there in diameter, it's close to that, yeah. I like to account for that, for something, some ratio like that. Yeah, what I don't want is I don't want it to be even. Even is good. What is better would be actually what you just mentioned, is to make sure that I'm a little bit deeper in terms of not the width, but the thickness right here. So the width is here on the top, thickness is here when I'm going underneath. So if the section that's kind of you can't see from the here down to the stem, I want that area to be maybe a little bit thicker. Okay, but I'm just doing it all by eye. It's just all visual. And again, I'm gonna roll this over a little bit, make a nice little bead right in there. I like that's a nice little detail. And now what I'll do is see if I can get under that bead right there on this side. That looks to be pretty good. Using dense woods is also a really great thing. If you do that, using dense woods, they shear cut and slice beautifully. So this is something that I'm very happy to use. I don't often use exotic woods, but Bubinga is, I'd say, one of my favorites if I ever do get around to using them. So here we are. I like to reserve them for demos, things like that. Most of the woods that I'm using are just in the Ozark Mountain Range where I live. And I like usually with spalted materials. So it's always a treat to be able to actually step up and work with an exotic every once in a while. I'm a little bit too far away from the stock. Need to go ahead and move this in. I was removing this area right there just so that I have the ability to swipe that inwards. So I'm going to go inboard towards the bed a little bit more. And I should be able to begin a taper from this side down to break that ring free. Should be good to do. It's just a little bit of a scrape right there. The other thing that's important, guys, especially for you younger guys in here, is that you want to make sure that when you're near the headstock right here, you don't have a gap right there. You don't want to have a gap and think that you can somehow magically work over here and act like the tailstock still, or the tool rest still exists. You've got to close that gap entirely, okay? Got to get right up there near the end grain. Not so it's touching, but so it's close. That way you want to trap yourself in here. Just like that. So now we'll make some downhill cuts, nice taper. What I'm looking to do on this side is to just really match up not only the curve, but the height, but where that curve and taper meets on the other side. Looks like I'm getting close to it, so I'll go ahead and make sure that bead is like the most perfect bead one could possibly cut, nice and clean. And some ask me, well, why don't you sand this? I prefer seeing something straight off the tool. Now we're going to sand and finish this, but we'll only need me to do that with probably 400 and 600 grit, which is nice. And now we'll turn that around. Looks like we're getting into the area where we can probably have a loose ring. We're getting close. Getting close. You got to make sure that we got that nice taper matched. And then we'll determine what side we actually want to break it free from. And getting close on that side. And when I'm starting to do this and I have the long point into the underside of that bead, what I'm then saying is that I should have enough thickness on both sides to account for a little bit of pressure and not enough that the bead would just break right off. Okay, that's what I want. I don't want it to break off, obviously. Want to keep the ring. It's a good size ring too. So just a matter of kind of going back and forth until I get it right. Long point only. I have that curve set, or the taper, that is. This is all finger support now. All finger support. Let's see what we can do on the other side. I bet you we can break this thing free now. We're getting really close to it. It wants to. Come on, you know you want to. There we go, loose ring. And we see a loose ring, and let's go ahead and make sure we get underneath it still. We're not done yet. Long point. There we go, loose ring. Right in there. So now we just got to finish it. That's when you say, yeah, you high-five somebody, and then you don't come back to the piece and screw it up. You high-five someone, you make sure you finish it. You ain't done yet. All right, so that's kind of fun. Talk in a minute, buddy. Yep. You got a question? Yep. Good question. Magic. Well, the right kind of magic. The right kind of magic is that. Well, that's a little bit of magic right there. I just need to make sure that it would be a captured ring. I just need to make sure that the diameter of here is not smaller than the stem. Okay. So that's what I'm learning to. That's what I'm determining at the moment. And I want to get a nice curve in there, nice sweep. And you can see that on that side, it's nice and captured. So let's just keep it right in there. I like to have a little bit of a raised detail in here. It kind of reminds me of the way that a bowling ball pin is shaped or something like in there. I kind of have that. I don't know. I kind of see that. So that's pretty good. And let's go ahead and then kind of finish that up. Fortunately, the sanding and finishing will be fast. Time? I'm saying 10 minutes. I'm guessing 10 minutes. Okay, good. Very good. Thank you, guys. And so then it's just a matter of, for my man over here with the question, I want to make sure that what I'm spinning is something that's nice and, just something that's nice, good, right? I don't want something so what does nice mean? It means that it's not flat. It's not something that I'm going to sort of dig in with my fingers. Nice sheer cut. And make some downhill shear cuts. I don't want to surpass about a thickness at the end of about 1/4 of an inch at the moment. I want to preserve that material at the very end so that if I want to do any last minute shaping on something like this, I can. At this point, really it's a matter of ensuring that I can round this bead at the end, this sort of end of the stem over nicely. And I think that in terms of the design, I'm happy with it. And so I'm going to go ahead and start sanding this, put a finish on it. And I can't make this cut without a little bit of finger support. That's not possible. And I think that in terms of design, that's something that I can call good. I'm fairly happy with. So let's call that good. And what I'll do, I like that. I'll go ahead and do, let's see, what can I start with? I'll start with, let's do some, this is 400, actually 320, excuse me. And you might suggest that I might suggest to you at this moment too that you don't want to put an aggressive. Again, you're not sanding a 22-inch diameter vessel at the moment, as you can see. This is very much not what that is. The opposite. Notice the same amount of finger support when I'm doing this. Okay, and I'll go ahead and touch the nose of that again so it spins. 320. Do some 320 on this side too. A lot of people say, I mean, who in here loves sanding? Everyone loves sanding, right? Loves it, loves it. Well, the thing I would encourage you is to not to love sanding, but to learn to make friends with sand. Learn to make friends with it. Okay? Learn to make friends. And the reason for that is because this is part of the burnishing of a finished object, and so you should have some respect for that and appreciate that. And that's a good thing. It's part of the finishing process. It's not something that you should bemoan and have a grudge against. It's something that you should, have an appreciation for. Now, if you start at 60 grit or 80 grit, that's when the story's a little different. So I do understand that, but we want to be more or less conscious of appreciating the sanding process too. That procedure is a part of the finishing process. All right, let's go ahead and now do some 600, and then we'll be good. There was a 6. I had to feel the grit to make sure I wasn't putting 60 on this, which would have been absolute sacrilege. That really would have messed this surface up pretty bad, actually. Pretty bad. And there's a little area in here where I'm going to do something at the very end that you might think is crazy, and that's okay. Demonstrations are only fun when you can kind of do something a little different and maybe risk something. That's what I learned. That's what I learned from Raffin. He always said, there's nothing more boring than a demonstration where everything goes exactly the way it should. It's fun when you can screw something up and fix it, though. That's pretty cool. So what I'm going to do is I see a little bit of a V. So I see something over here that's a little unsavory to me. Let's see what I got. There's a little bit of a V. Actually, you know what? No, that's going to be okay. Never mind. No, that'll be fine. That'll be okay. No, that's good. No, I'm good.
They're laughing at you.
I think it's there to make sure everybody's still awake.
So and then we're going to go ahead and actually add a waterlocks finish here, which will be it's just a nice poly finish. Okay. I typically don't use polyurethanes, but for something like this, I do. I'm going to go ahead and slow that down. You're going to be wearing that on your hat. If I was spinning at that speed, I'd be flying that finish all over you. We got to slow that down. So now what I'll do, I'll add some of that, and I'll do that with the softer material here.
Why do you prefer waterlocks over the poly?
Well, this is a poly. This is a polyurethane. So yeah, but it just happens to be the brand that I have at the moment that I'm using. But I want to use something for this piece. I want to make this shine beautifully. So I want something that is. I do want something that has poly on it, poly in it, poly based. So there we go. That'll be a nice finish right there. And I will actually go ahead and speed this up.
I like the look of the stuff, but the problem is once you open it, you gotta use it.
Yeah, you got to use it fast. So you really do. Yeah, open time's no good for this. When I was finishing, I just wore some myself. The thing that I told you was going to happened to me. Happened to me instead. I was looking out for you. Oh. So now that's not fast enough. I'm going to go ahead and speed this up to probably about 2,500 RPM. And I just need to create a little bit of heat. I'll basically compress some of that just so it's not so full of the actual finish itself. Now I'll go ahead and add a buff on this. There's no need to put wax over this. This will be fine as is. And the real thing on this piece is it better spin. It's got to spin. Should be a good one. And this is strong enough grain. This is a strong enough density of grain that this should spin fine. Should be, and the pressure looks like the pressure that I'm applying is the right amount. Okay, so that'll be good. That'll be good. And if we stop the lathe, let's see how it's going. How's this working out? I say that's looking nice, and it looks a lot nicer. It'll look nicer when you guys actually see it here passed around. Yeah, this is just yeah. Uh-huh. Yeah, I'm treating I'm at the moment just treating it like a friction polish. Yep. But I wouldn't need to put wax on something like this. This would be Yep. Yeah, this stuff's good though.
That waterlock here,
This is Waterlocks. Yeah. This is a Waterlocks poly. Yep. No, they're not all of them. No, this particular one is. I like using this for finishing smaller items, like tops, usually in exotic woods, where there's too great a presence of naturally occurring oils in them. I don't want to actually put something like a penetrating oil in, like boiled linseed oil, walnut oil, anything like that. That's just going to make the finish kind of blotchy. So I'd rather use for something like this, as long as it's an exotic wood. Again, higher presence of the oils in the wood, really oily woods, I just use a poly. But that's pretty rare. It's not common that I'll do that. But for an item like a spinning top, yeah, that's what I would prefer using. So now we'll go ahead and finish this off. Getting close to the end. And this is when it matters, right? One last cut means what? You want me to do 5 more? No, just kidding. The stem's a little stronger, so when I say one last cut on Bubinga at the very end, usually does mean 5 more cuts. There we go. That's good. So that worked out. And right there. Yeah. So, and we'll go ahead and pass this around. And what I'm going, yeah. So up there, what I do is So I'll just go ahead and sand this down a little bit with probably just. That's what do we got here? Oh, okay, that's 220. 220. Take a little 220 right there. That'll just hit the very end of the stem right there. And then what I can do, if I'm so inclined and I wanted to, what I could do is I can put a little pad in here, little sanding pad, and hit that with 400, 600 be good. So that's what I would do if this was going to be shipped out and go to like a novelty store. That's something that that would be the next process. But I'd plan for that in a batch, something like this. It's a really good item, but it's something where I'll just kind of do it this way, just for the interest of time. And I don't even think I'm going to touch it. I'd actually rather just leave it because that's a burnished cut. It's clean enough. I don't want to touch it again. So why don't we get that board up again, and why don't we spin her? See if it's a spinner, okay? I bet you it spins. It better. So let's see. There we go. I got that ring on there. It's kind of nice. Kind of fun to see. Yeah. It's a pretty even one, too.
Yeah.
You could just grab the ring. Like that. Just grab it on the ring. And then upside down, too. I've never quite been able to spin one upside down and then like grab the ring and pick it. Like you do that, that's cool. You guys could probably do it. You guys, yeah, you can. Yeah, you all can do it. All right, there you go. That's a good one too. There it is. So you guys, yeah, why don't you go ahead and pass that around? Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right.